Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new video. Today, the first video we have under my new series, The Breakdown, is going to be, what is gas? Obviously you put gas in your car, but what does it really do? This video here is just to give people who don't know more of the basics of what it does. I'm not going to get too in depth into it. If someone has a basic understanding of internal combustion engines, this video is probably not going to be for them. But if someone really wants to know what putting gas into your car does, well, this video is for you. But first, before we get into it, as always, the usual YouTube stuff. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I do appreciate all that love. At the same time, too, if you dislike it, just make sure to comment and let me know why. That way I can get some feedback and know how to make my videos better for you in the future. Now, unless you have an all-electric car, and of course that is where cars seem to be going, you obviously put gas in your car, whether it's a mild hybrid, full hybrid, or a regular standard internal combustion engine. You're putting gas into your car. You know you're putting your gas in, and you know that it powers the vehicle. But how? Well, for most people, putting your foot on the gas is a term that everyone has heard, right? And they think that when you put your foot down, that's putting gas into the engine. And that's true to some degree, but there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot more that goes into it that a lot of people don't realize. So you're putting gas into your car, sure, but where does it go? How does it get there? Well, the first and most obvious thing is when you're putting gas in your car, where is it going? Obviously the gas tank. Everyone knows that. But knowing where your gas tank is very interesting, because some cars, for example, this Infiniti here that is all-wheel drive, because it has a drive shaft, the gas tank will be off to the side, and you'll find that in a lot of rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive cars. But if you have a front-wheel drive car, you tend to see the gas tank right behind the rear axle, right over here. Protects the gas tank in case of a rear impact, and it also balances the car out. This is important. There's actually a lot of engineering that goes into where the gas tank goes, because when it gets filled with fluid, the car's got to be able to be balanced and drive well, right? At the same time, when being empty, it'll lighten the load in the rear, and that's important to make sure that the car can still handle well. So even where the gas tank goes is important. Now, when you start up your car, the fuel is pulled out of the car to get it going. Of course, there's other things that go into starting the car, the starter, the electrical system, and so on, but you need the fuel to go into the engine to start it up. That is then pulled through the fuel lines by the fuel pump. There'll also be a fuel filter located as well. Some cars have a fuel filter located along the framing of the car itself, where the fuel lines will run. Other cars will have it as a part of the fuel pump itself and may never even need to be changed. You'll find, though, and this is important for those who don't know, the fuel pumps, the fuel filters, I should say, that kind of stand on their own, those ones there may need to be changed periodically when you do your tune-up. So it's often forgotten, so do remember that too. Here's a little tip for those who want to try it. You want to hear your fuel pump in action? Most cars, if you put the key in and put it to the on position, so that, just for if you don't know, obviously there's the off, there's accessory, which just turns on the radio and so on. There's on, which is when the car is running, and then there's start. So turn it to on, but don't start the car. And you'll hear a little whirring in the back, a little noise, something like that. Most times that's the fuel pump engaging. That's the fuel pump getting ready for when you start the car, it sends the fuel through. That's what you're hearing when you hear that little whirring noise in the back. Now here's the most interesting thing. When you're pressing this pedal right here, most people call it the gas. You're pressing the gas, you're pressing the brake, right? And of course, if it's standard, you have your clutch. But that's not actually the gas. Here's a quick mind-blowing thing for some of you who don't know. That's actually the throttle. What? The throttle? What is that? Some of you know this, and again, this won't be a surprise to you, but again, a lot of people don't know that. And that, for example, on this car right here is that little device right there where my finger is, that little silver device. That is the throttle body. Cars had it before. It was a carburetor. That's what I know. A lot of people have heard what a carburetor is. Essentially the same thing. And what that does is when you're actually pushing the throttle, you're actually opening up and allowing air to come into the engine. I'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. But when you let that air in, through a various devices, mass airflow sensor, everything like that, I'll go into that in another video. Various devices that are set up within the intake system will read how much air is coming into the car. Once it reads that, it'll then adjust and send the right amount of fuel into the car to match it. So what you're actually doing is you're not pressing the throttle. When you press the throttle, you're not pressing the gas, you're pressing the air, believe it or not. The engine then accounts for that. And it looks at how much air is coming in and sends the right amount of fuel in as well. So you've started your car. You're getting ready to go. You've got gas in the gas tank. The engine is running, obviously fuel's getting in there. You put your foot on the gas. When you put your foot on the gas, it's opening up the throttle body. You're actually letting air into the car. The car then reads how much air is going through, then sends a message through various sensors and everything, sends a message to the fuel pump through the computer and says, hey, I've got this much air, now I need this much gas to go with it. Sends the gas through the fuel pump, it sends more gas through, pressurizes it, sends it through the fuel filters to filter out any sediment or anything like that. That's important. I'll get to that in a bit because believe it or not, gas is not 100% pure. Comes through and it comes through the fuel rails. These are rails that some cars, this car because it has a cover, you can't really see it, but some cars will have these rails that run across the top. It also depends on the type of car. And then it goes to the fuel injectors. These are in the engine itself and goes into the combustion chamber. So now you're realizing, again, if you're new to this, there's so much more to the engine that's going on. You've got air going in, you've got gas going in. Why is all that going through? Well, some of you may not even realize it. This is where some of that high school science and grade school science comes in. You need three main things to create an explosion. You need fuel, you need air, and you need spark, you need fire, you need something to ignite it. So, what you're actually doing is pulling the air in, and that air, as it's passing through the throttle body and getting in, it's going into the engine as well. Now you've got the car pulling the fuel it needs and putting it through. And then we go through a process in the combustion chamber. The best way I can put it, it's one of my gurus, one of the people who's taught me really early on in my early years, is he put it in a very funny way, and I'm going to tell it to you now. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. Yeah, it sounds dirty, I know. But by doing that, let me just explain to you what it is. So, suck. It's sucking the air in, right? That's the intake. It's pulling air in through, into the combustion chamber, and then it's putting fuel in there too. So now you've got air, and you've got fuel in with the pistons inside the engine itself. Then you got squeeze. And what that is the piston, as I'm sure some of you have seen. If not, look up online on how engine works. The piston's moving up and down. So now you've got this fuel and you've got this air in the combustion chamber, and the piston's moving up, and it's compressing it, it's squeezing it in. And then you've got bang, the explosion. I know a lot of you probably heard of spark plug. Some of you may not. We've heard of spark plug. That's another thing that's inside the combustion chamber. And that will then send a little tiny spark. Now you've got this fuel and you've got this air that's all compressed and heavy and ready to explode, and you just set it off with a little spark. And then you get this explosion, and that pushes the piston back down with force. And this is happening throughout your engine, whether you have a 4-cylinder, a 6-cylinder, an 8-cylinder, a 3-cylinder, doesn't matter. And you get blow, the exhaust. After it's burned all that off, you've now just got all this kind of burnt air that's no longer any good for the engine. You can't compress, you can't use it anymore. It's used up, and it's got to push that out. And from here, this is where the byproduct of all that comes out. After you've had this whole combustion process, it'll send all the burnt up fuel and air and everything, and it sends it through here, and that's where you get the exhaust. And that's how the car works. It just sends the exhaust through, and we'll go through another time how an exhaust works and what's involved in that. But that's pretty much how you see it. That's what the fuel does. The fuel goes into the engine, being pulled through by how much air you're requiring by pressing down on the gas. It then goes through a combustion process, burns it up, and sends it right out. That is your whole combustion process, and that's how the fuel is the start of all that. So here's my pro tip for today. Don't let your gas tank ever get empty. So remember I talked about you putting fuel into the car. That's going to the gas tank, and the fuel pump is pulling that through. And either attached to the fuel pump or somewhere in the fuel line system, there'll actually be a fuel filter. The reason that is needed is because so much sediment and stuff gets built up at the bottom of the gas tank, either through when you're pumping the gas or if you build up in the tank over time as the stuff's left over. This is actually a gunk, and I've seen sometimes when you open a gas tank, a really old one, you should see how terrible it is in there. Now, if you're letting your gas tank get empty all the time, the car has no choice but to try and force and pull that through. What you're doing is, one, you could be pulling a lot of crap that you don't want into the engine. It's affecting fuel economy, it's affecting power. Two, the fuel pump has to work harder. It's working harder to pull all that through. You're shortening the life little bit by little bit on your fuel pump. And three, if you're causing the fuel filter to get clogged a whole lot quicker. So then you'll need to change it a whole lot quicker. So a lot of unnecessariness. So even if, I know people are on a budget, I personally know people who can't afford to fill their tank all the time. It's the realities of life, especially with gas prices being as they are. But if that's the case, at least try and keep it a half tank and above and top up from there, because once you run it down to empty, you're actually doing more harm than good. So my question for you guys is, what's the craziest story you ever heard involving gasoline? Recently, I heard online that someone said, don't know how true it is, that someone came in without an understanding of a car, who didn't know how to put washer fluid in. Someone said, hey, it's easy to do. Why go to a dealer? Just go look for the washer fluid, simply get the washer fluid, put it in. Unfortunately, this person didn't understand it, put it into the gas tank instead, not understanding how that works. That's a story I saw online. Take that for a grain of salt, but I thought it was very funny, and unfortunately, I could kind of see that happening with some people I've dealt with in the past. So what is the funniest story, if you have any, of anything involving gas or the combustion engine itself? Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next video.